We will say it like it really is.
With dignity and respect.
Committed to free speech and common sense.
Upbeat and entertaining.
Straight talking and direct.
We may agitate each other and you.
Heartfelt and passionate.
Thought-provoking, provocative and controversial.
Fearless and truthful.
Hello and welcome to The Pledge. So, I have to admit it, I too am hooked on Love Island. Oh, no. Hot singles in a swanky villa, getting hooked up. What's not to like? But Nick...
Didn't do me justice.
I'd just like to say I've been really pranging out these last few days. On paper, I think your debating skills are only 5 out of 10. But I was proper gutted to be mugged off last time. Anyway, time for a DMC. That's deep, meaningful conversation, Afua. On the show this week, Carol says Theresa May should lead us to Brexit. June wants to give her take on the N-word controversy. Afua's going to disagree with Bill Gates. And Nick admits he hasn't been a good citizen. US first daughter Ivanka Trump is clearly a daddy's girl, but she's doing women a disservice with her dizzyingly high profile. She hasn't exactly worked her way up from the bottom, and it's not right that she should sit at the top table among world leaders at summits. She's unelected, unqualified, and has never held public office, and yet there she is, dining with Angela Merkel, schmoozing with IMF boss Christine Lagarde, and more recently, Ivanka sat in for pop at a high-level G20 meeting. To be fair to Miss Trump, she has all the charm, grace and poise that her father and sundry other male leaders lack, as we see here from Mrs. Merkel's delighted reaction to Mr. Putin at the same event. Did we all see the eye roll there? Let's just have another look. Looks like Vladimir was doing a bit of mansplaining. My worry is that Miss Trump's high visibility is not inspiring millions of little girls to reach higher, as someone has approved. Instead, it's a signal to young women that in order to get ahead, even in 2017, you need to be a stunning blonde size 0 and related to someone famous. Shut up, Nick. And that, ladies, is not progress.
I'm intrigued because your problem seems to be that this woman dined with Angela Merkel. When I remind you that, among others, Mrs. May has dined with the Crankies, what is the criteria that allows you, therefore, to break bread with a world leader?
No, Nick, why are you just ignoring the point completely?
Because it's exactly what you said.
No, she should not be there. She's not a world leader. Why is she with... But is she dining with the Crankies at a G20 summit?
No, it wasn't.
That's the point.
But she is part of the... Ivanka is part of the delegation.
She is...
She works at the White House.
She's
yes,
part of the...
I know.
If she'd been on a modelling shoot or something like that...
This is sheer nepotism.
Hang on, let me make my point. If she'd been on a modelling shoot elsewhere in the country and Dad had to go and take a phone call or whatever it might have been, or to talk to the Kremlin, whatever it might have been. If they'd flown her in for something like that or a fashion show, I get it. She was part of the delegation. She had attended previous meetings. She attended subsequent meetings. Angela Merkel...
That doesn't make it better that she's been to summit meetings before. You're still ignoring the point that Ivanka is not a world leader.
Can you just clarify
who does she speak for?
Well, whatever she might have been. No, but whatever she might have been doing. But fashion, I don't care what she was at. Tennis, she could have been at Wimbledon.
No, but in a sense, what we're seeing is... Surely there is a suggestion here that Donald Trump is grooming his own daughter to be his successor, as we saw from this tweet exchange between Chelsea Clinton and the 45th president, I think it is. He says, if Chelsea Clinton were asked to hold the seat for her mother, as her mother gave our country away, the fake news would say Chelsea for Prez. And then she says, good morning, Mr. President. It would never have occurred to my mother or my father to ask me, were you giving our country away? Hoping not.
Well, all I do is I refer you to the following points. She was part of the delegation. She'd attended previous meetings. She attended subsequent meetings that took part of the whole G20. Angela Merkel, who I think we'd agree, has got a bit of form in this. She's been to more G20s than any of them. She said it's perfectly normal, it's perfectly acceptable. I'm staggered that you talk about doing a disservice for women. I would, and if that it falls to me to defend it, I would have thought you'd support the fact that a woman actually gets to sit in there.
I actually cannot believe I am hearing.
Come on, let's have it.
I cannot believe I'm hearing this. Carol, let me, because you're going to probably agree with Nick, aren't you?
I'm going to say...
So let us get a counter view in first, please. Nick, it is offensive to suggest that the only way a woman can get into the position of chairing high-level meetings at the G20 alongside Angela Merkel is by being the daughter of...
didn't say that.
Why is that progress for women?
You didn't say that.
Progress for women with women on merit because they've been elected or because of their talent or capability or legitimacy. Exactly.
And Angela Merkel doesn't have a problem, so why should you
Sadly,
guys?
Donald Trump doesn't have any of that experience. Donald Trump is not a politician either, but he's there because he was elected. And the thing is... The thing is, Trump is running the White House like he would run a new family business, so I guess he would have his family there. But also, arguably, politics today is all about money. And this is one of the richest US administrations ever. And there's also the point to make that, you know, this woman... hang on a second. This woman, she's rich. She could have sat around all her life getting facials and buying Birkin bags. She didn't do that. She's been working. She runs a business empire. She started up a fashion empire. She's worked since she... What do you mean, oh, God?
How does that...
She runs a fashion empire. Yes, she does. She runs... She sells shoes, bags and clothes.
Hold on.
I'm not that
first
interested
question.
in her having dinner, you know, whatever. I'm more interested in the fact that she was chairing a meeting on Africa,
She sat in the chair.
Africa and on migration.
She sat in the chair.
How is she qualified to be the US, the representative of that nation in a meeting of that importance?
It is perfectly acceptable for officials, not politicians, for officials to take the place of the president. He was out of the room for a few minutes and then he came back.
And I repeat my question, what qualifies her to be the official?
Well, what qualified Angela Merkel?
She's the elected leader of Germany.
What qualifies Trump? He's not a politician either.
He's the elected leader, though I don't like it.
Carol, can we just accept that, as we've seen also from the other Trump news this week about what Donald Jr. has been up to, that this is in a sense like a family business, a Sicilian family business.
That's not the same
a Sicilian family business, which isn't how we want our politics to be run. Shall we just hear from the lady in question? Okay. Let's have a look at Ivanka in action.
You know, I try to stay out of politics. You know, his political instincts are phenomenal. He did something that no one could have imagined he'd be able to accomplish. There were very few who saw it early on. I feel blessed to have been part of the ride from day one and before, but he did something pretty remarkable. But I don't profess to be a political savant, so I leave the politics to other people and really lean into the issues that I care deeply about.
Had she not been the first daughter, would she be along for the ride at all? Would he have hired somebody who had a handbag line to come to the summits with him?
But the fact of the matter is, she's quite a capable woman, I think, and she wasn't there to sit in that chair.
Not for that job.
She was there to attend a World Bank event for female entrepreneurs. She's perfectly entitled to be there and perfectly qualified to be there. So, and the fact that you guys are talking about her as being some blonde girl with makeup, so what? That's actually quite sexist, I think. No, but it was in the intro. It doesn't matter if she's blonde, it doesn't matter if she's thin and gorgeous or whatever.
I'm afraid it does matter, Carol. I genuinely don't think she would be in that seat if she wasn't thin, blonde, gorgeous and his daughter.
I don't think I actually welcome this. I welcome this. Do you know why I welcome this?
Why?
Because I think we all know that this is not a meritocratic world, that America is not a meritocratic country.
Yeah.
You know, that there is not gender parity in politics and power. And when I see this, it makes it so much easier for us to make the case about how unfair and rigged this is.
So there's
all those people, all those kids being lectured about how this is a meritocracy. If you work hard, you get rewarded. They can see this now and know what reality is. And you know what? That's transparent.
So and this is a woman being carried into politics.
At least we know the reality.
Can I add to that? I think, Rachel, your point is absolutely spot on, and I'm so confused by what these two are saying. I'm like flabbergasted. I'm like, really? But also, it does. No, I think most people would agree with us actually on this one. And what I find just absolutely confusing is the delusion of Donald Trump, because at that same G20 meeting he stood up on stage to say that Ivanka's life would be much easier if she wasn't his daughter. What planet is he on? She wouldn't be there if she wasn't his daughter. Are you trying to say that woman is qualified for that job?
I'm not saying she's qualified.
Then she shouldn't be there.
She's not a qualified politician.
If she's not qualified for the job, she shouldn't be there.
Trump is not a qualified politician either, and he's entitled to
But he was elected.
She works at the White House. She's an unpaid intern.
Thanks
of course,
to him.
she's going to.
She wasn't slaving away in the West
Rachel,
Wing,
that in
Carol.
families all over the world, people don't help each other. Of course they do. She wasn't. She was not there to talk at that meeting. She was there to fill a chair while he was out of the room.
Do you think she's an icon of social mobility, Nick?
What the three rather shrill-voiced members of the pledge tonight have failed to have done is to create a whole melange of why you loathe Donald Trump. And you have every right to loathe Donald Trump.
I'm actually coming round to him, Nick.
You're bringing in Donald Trump Jr., you're bringing in some of his past businesses, and Carol's given a very valiant defence. I just want to quote some of the words back to you, Rachel, when you said she did women a great disservice. How?
She did.
How?
Because she...
Now, hold on. Sorry, I don't want to be rude, but she wrote it, so how? How is that a disservice?
Simply by the visual image alone, which has sadly been deleted by Twitter, so we couldn't use it, of Ivanka Trump sitting between two world leaders gives the optic that in order to make it to the top, it's all that determines your ascent is
but why
what
women?
you look like,
why
who you are. That doesn't happen with men. And his
what do you mean? What
Donald Jr. wasn't there because...
But if he had been... But why women? That's a bit I don't get.
Because this is what happens. Women are first ladies, women are first daughters, men never are. So this is something that women have to go through and the world has to accept and think it's good for women when it's in fact bad for women.
There are not counter-images of other women in similar positions of power. If that picture of the G20...
If it had been Donald Jr., it would have been fine.
If that image of the G20... well, this is a whole separate issue. If this image of the G20 had been 50% men and women, if it wasn't just Angela Merkel practically on her own, it would be a different context. But the reality is, this is one of the very few images we have of a woman at the top table. And she's not there on merit.
And this is Ivanka's fault.
She's the symptom, not the cause.
And this is Ivanka Trump's fault.
She is the symptom and not the cause.
And for the fourth time.
She shouldn't be saying she stands up for women's rights, because she sure as hell doesn't. Anyway, I'm going to wrestle this. Rachel, brilliant debate. Ignore these two. Anyway.
One view.
Oh,
get Ivanka in for her.
Yeah, bring her in. Oh, dear. Anyway, it's my debate now. Exactly, we're all here on merit. There you go. So, it's now to move on from Ivanka Trump to another woman who's been having a bit of a difficult time lately, and I am talking about poor old Theresa May. Goodness, it hasn't been good for her. And her party isn't doing much to help her either. Either its leading cabinet members plotting her downfall, backbench MPs predicting her demise, or a Conservative MP just nonchalantly using the N-word, as if it were normal everyday language. You know, as one does.
And then we get to the woodpile, which is, in 2 years, what happens? There is no deal.
Oof, not good. Unsurprisingly, as soon as the tape of Anne-Marie Morris's comments were leaked, there were cries from within her own party and the opposition for her to be deselected. Instead, Mrs May issued a statement condemning her remarks and suspended her. This was seen as too soft by many MPs, demanding that at the very least Anne-Marie Morris should be thrown out of the party. Now, for those of you who watch the show regularly, you will know that I'm completely against anyone using the N-word. As a black person, I believe the horrific history surrounding this word means that it should be retired for good. However, I don't think Miss Morris should be severely punished. Instead, she should be debated and challenged so that she truly understands why this word is so offensive and painful. Honest and open dialogue is the only way to change hidden prejudice once and for all.
Well, June, thanks for picking this topic, because I'm really glad we get the chance to have an open dialogue about it, which I think is good. And I think it's actually quite a fascinating series of events. And the reason I find it fascinating is that I just didn't know people use this language. This is not a phrase that I'd heard before, apart from in 2008 when another senior Tory used it. You kind of think Conservatives step away from the plantation language. But I do question your whole approach to kind of softly, her not losing her position. I mean, you almost present it as if it's either or, you know, it's mutually exclusive. Either she debates it and is challenged, or she loses her job and then kind of falls off a cliff. And I think actually you can have a zero-tolerance approach and show just how serious it is to use this language. And just listening to that, you know, it sounded so calculated. It wasn't a swear word that slipped out. It was a metaphor that seemed quite carefully chosen. And to me, that is very serious. And I'm curious to know more about why you feel so concerned for her to remain in her position. I mean, that's not the only way that she can be debated and challenged on it.
Yeah.
And then just finally, I don't feel that she's being honest. And actually,
how the hell do you know?
let's just show you the apology that she said. She said she has apologised. Important to say that. She said the comment was totally unintentional. I apologise unreservedly for any offence caused. I would love to know how that was unintentional, because to me it was a metaphor that fit the situation she was talking about, and it sounds a lot like it was unintentional that she was recorded and reported as saying it, because how could you say something and that be unintentional? I just don't understand that.
Because you can make, you know, this is a terrible word. It's outdated. It's wrong.
But
it's
wasn't
crass.
a word. It was a phrase. It was a metaphor and a phrase.
But the word you were objecting to a word in that phrase.
No.
She could have used needle in a haystack. She didn't use this one. You said this yesterday.
Well, it was the phrase.
Okay, let me speak then. So basically, it's outdated. It's wrong. It's crap. She knew immediately that she said it, but it wasn't racist, because to be racist, it had to be said at someone, to someone, or about someone. This was said, as you've just said. No, this was just said in the form of a metaphor. Now, you say you don't know how someone could use that word. Let me tell you, it's because you're not old enough. Because you're not old enough to remember a time, and I'm not saying this is a good thing.
My point.
You're not old enough to remember a time when this word was, I wouldn't say common parlance, but I remember clothes in stores being labelled N brown to describe a shade of brown. So for you to say people were racist to use that word, so you can roll your eyes and all the rest of it. But the bottom line is, I don't believe she was. I don't believe for a second it was something that came into the back of her. It came from the back of her head to the front. Have you never said anything crass before? Have you never said anything unintentional?
Not around that space.
Not around this one particularly, but about anything, and wished you hadn't said it. But what really got me this week was the foaming at the mouth Twitter mob. As soon as someone makes a mistake, they're on you. Reputation trashed, job over, get rid of it. And all the left hardliners were saying that not only should she have been sacked and chucked out of the party, but the people at that meeting who didn't have a go at her should also be admonished. I mean, how Stalin-esque is that? Because they didn't rat on her. They should also be admonished.
But I am curious as to why they didn't say anything.
No, but Afua, this is my point. Actually, Carol, believe it or not,
we're agreeing on this one.
Partly agreeing. I still think it's racist.
I don't.
But my point is, we mustn't ignore that there was a time when this sort of language was normal.
But that's why I'm saying I would love to hear her engaging with that and being more honest about why she said it.
And that's why I'm saying we need the debate and the discussion without actually demonising her. Because, can I just finish?
Yes,
2 minutes. Without actually Thank you. Without actually demonising her, because I don't think it was calculated, as you were saying. I think it was so nonchalant. Like, she didn't even realise she'd said it. And before you comment, Nick, I want to show you a debate that Ice Cube had with Bill Maher in America over this same issue. And this is why I think we need to start talking about this stuff. Let's look.
You know, it's a word that has been used against us. It's like a knife, man. And you can use it as a weapon or you can use it as a tool. It's been used as a weapon against us by white people. And we're not going to let that happen again. By nobody, because it's not cool. Now, I know you heard it's in the lexicon, everybody talking, but that's our word now. That's our word now, and you can't have it back.
And I personally don't believe it should be anybody's word. I want that word completely retired.
There is, and I just want to come to that, but you'll know, not the sort of music I listen to, but it's frequently used in that kind of... Is that right?
No.
So
and I've always said no.
So it shouldn't be a word that...
needs to be archived and retired.
OK, I agree with that.
Because that word means ownership of people.
OK, just
we want no part of it.
Just address Carol's central point, which is, had this... And by the way, I think you're being very unfair to this MP, not that I know. I genuinely think it just came out of sort of subconscious. Had she turned to someone and said, you are a N-word, ridiculous. It is, as she said, it is a metaphor. It's not a direct slur. Just respond to that point.
from the past.
My response, the reason I think it's racist is because
the word is racist, the use is not.
No, the reason I find that, and I'm just talking from subjective perspective for a moment, so this is how I feel, and of course you can disagree, and you're all entitled to your opinion. I found that phrase offensive personally. It is offensive. Because, not just because it involved the word, but because of its meaning. You know, the origins of that specific phrase, and, you know, we're not supposed to say it on air because it is so offensive. It was used historically to refer to newborn babies.
You have to have it.
It was used historically.
When they were trying to hide. They were trying to hide from the slave
its origins were during the Underground Railroad, when slaves were trying to hide and would literally hide in a woodpile. But it became... Let me finish, Carol.
She didn't have
let me finish explaining its origin, please, just for a moment. It came to be used to refer to newborn babies when they were born darker than people expected, to suggest there might be a black parenthood lurking in the paternity. And so it has all of those sinister contexts of race being such a pejorative issue.
It has no evil intention. To be racist, you have to have an evil intention.
So just responding to you, I actually... sounds weird to say because I don't agree with what you're saying, but I kind of applaud your response more. You know, I'm interested in the reason that people have this lexicon, and I would have liked to hear from her. I mean, I think we've all got caught up in me saying that it was calculated. That wasn't my main point.
Tell me something.
Just let me finish this point, Carol. Just let me finish this point. I would like to hear from her why she used it, and if it is something that's a relic from her childhood. As Lord Dixon Brow, when he used it in 2008, he said, I apologise, this was a common phrase when I was young, and it's still lurking somewhere in my subconscious. Fine. Well, I'm interested in that. We have these skeletons in our closet. I would like us to talk about them and not just pretend they're not there.
Wait, please.
Every time I try to say anything,
you've been saying a lot in my debate. Please, forgive me. Well, just 2 moments, and then I'll give you the floor. This is what I'm saying. This is why I think it's important that we don't bash people over their head with the PC stick. So therefore they cannot be honest, because the reason she had to come up with that statement is because of responses like yours. So therefore she cannot be honest and say, you know what, I'm from an era where we did used to say these things.
We need my response is because she
but my point is we need to create a forum where people can debate this stuff without judgment, and then that's how we deal with it. So that's why we've seen the rise in hate crime and xenophobia post-Brexit, because this stuff has always been hidden under the surface.
Would you say the same if it was an anti-Semitic remark?
Totally.
So you would say that we shouldn't be too harsh. We should have
the debate. We should, and I think the way it wasn't in the way that I think the Conservative Party really needs to look at racism within their party.
Agreed.
In the way that Labour. Well, Labour didn't look at anti-Semitism properly. Yes, exactly. They didn't look at it properly. But at least they acknowledged there was a problem. The Tories don't even acknowledge there's a problem within the party. There's a history of this in it.
But you're talking...
Rachel, you haven't said anything. Do you want to add?
I think this is very complicated. I didn't know the actual meaning of the phrase. I had heard the phrase because I'm pretty ancient. But the MP in question was born in 1957, where people said things like that. But, I mean, I slightly take issue with what you said about actually cleansing the language completely of the N-word, because I think that actually, as we saw from that black musician, he regards it as a tool for black empowerment now. So I wouldn't want to take away that word from
I want to take it away
people.
from them. I disagree with that, because that's why we get this confusion. When black people are using that word willy-nilly...
I don't think it's confusing.
If you're white, you can't use that word.
Well, you can't have it both ways, Afua. We can't say we want to use it every 5 minutes and no one else can. No.
There's a pop group with the N-word in their title, as you know.
Lots of pop groups.
So what do we do about them?
I'd rather they change their name. I don't want that word.
When a television station plays the movie The Dam Busters, and Guy Gibson's dog was called that name, and he gets run over, and when he comes down, when Guy Gibson lands from The Dam Busters, well, I'm telling you, his dog was a black lab, I think, and he was called the N-word. That was his name. Historical fact.
Good.
And when he lands, he asks his Batman, or his, the guys looking after him, do they bleep the word out? Because the dog had been run over while he's doing the Dam Busters. The dog is fatally run over. Do we bleep the word out when they translate the movie?
I haven't seen the film.
Well, I'm asking you. It's historical.
I don't know what that
historical
film
fact. The Dam Busters. It's about it's about a historic operation in World War II. Yeah, I wasn't born. Do we bleep the dog's name out?
All I'm saying is I do not think the N-word is a word that we need to be using in 2017.
We bleep the dog's name out. So we change history.
That's not about changing history.
Acknowledging history.
It's about acknowledging history and not using it today.
OK, me next. So, this week, is the first anniversary of Mrs May's premiership. But I don't suppose they've been cracking open the champers in Downing Street. Because since that disastrous election result, the career of the woman we thought would steer us triumphantly through Brexit is now in ruins. Mrs May managed to convert a 23-point lead over an unelectable Marxist into a situation where Corbyn is now a PM in waiting. And the payback for that, the bullying, the vilification, has been brutal. This week, she asked opposing parties to come together with some ideas, but was told to sod off by the great socialist Jeremy Corbyn, for whom power now seems more important than people. Brexit, depending on how it's handled, could make us or break us. So why are we trying to destroy one of the few people who can make it a success? And instead of putting Britain's interests first, why are sanctimonious politicians, many from May's own party, forever finding new ways to punish her? Don't they get it? Punish her and the EU vultures will punish us. These MPs are treating Brexit like it's a game, forgetting that what they do affects people's lives, their jobs and their children. Never has there been a more important time for politicians to pull together. But instead, they're scrapping like cats in a sack and not giving a toss what happens to us, the people who elected them. They need to accept that, for now, Theresa May is our Prime Minister. There's no one else in the Tory party who's vaguely ready or able to take her place, which is why, for Britain's sake, we need to get behind her.
I mean, you had some blinders there, didn't you, Carol? I mean...
Laugh before you slaughter me, that's all.
I agree with you, yes. There is nobody in the Cabinet that is vaguely able or ready to take her place. Yep. I also agree with you that it was a disastrous election result. But I don't agree with you that she's the person to lead us through Brexit. I think the election result shows us exactly that she's not.
But she's the only person that we've got currently, and she is Prime Minister, and until she's not, she is going to be the person spearheading what happens in Brussels. And what I fear, June, what I completely fear is that we have bullied, humiliated, vilified her so much, she holds no sway anywhere. So, yeah?
Can I...
Oh, hello. Just stop there. You were like a teacher.
Yeah. It's not the country that is destroying Theresa May. What we're seeing is that
her
Brexit...
own politicians.
I don't want you to interrupt me for a second. Brexit, I'm afraid, is destroying everything in its path, and this includes Theresa May.
That's a great
Brexit, or the European referendum, destroyed Cameron and Osborne. We saw the roulette wheel there on screen. Yeah. They put the country on black. It came up red. Yeah. They went. Brexit is destroying... Brexit is destroying the Tory party. It could still destroy the Labour Party. It's not us who are destroying Theresa May. It's the fact that she is pursuing her Brexit agenda, the hard Brexit agenda, which she says was the will of the people and has to be executed. In fact, when we just drill down on what the will of the people means, 48% of an electorate comprising 37% of the population voted for Brexit, which means around 26%, actually, of the population voted for a course of action.
You can how you like,
and wait,
52,
no, just let me finish. I'm on my peroration.
And
the problem she has is not that she's a poor Prime Minister who took a terrible gamble that went disastrously, calamitously wrong for her. It's that the will of the people conflicts with the national interest. And she isn't brave enough, and nobody in Cabinet is yet brave enough to stand up and say that is the case.
This is what Remainers do. They interpret every situation to suit their agenda.
No,
this is not the case.
The situation does not suit my agenda.
She lost her majority because she ran the most god-awful campaign. She turned out to be not the person... Let me talk now. Let me talk now. She ran the most god-awful campaign. She actually said today...
Yes, and Brexit destroyed her election campaign because she said this is a Brexit election, and look
you
what
guys
happened.
are always telling me that I've got to let you finish. Let me. She had a terrible campaign. She has said today in an interview today that she didn't address the issues that she would inflame the people. She didn't address the jams that just about managing. She didn't go for young people. She said what she didn't do. She didn't slate Corbyn's manifesto, which she should have done because it could have been pulled apart in 5 minutes. And no, I didn't hear a single Tory during that campaign say this manifesto will bankrupt this country in 2 weeks, which is what most financial analysts said. So It's not because of Brexit that she's in trouble. It's because her campaign
Yes, it is,
was
because
terrible.
a lot of people voted Labour because they thought they were getting a softer vote.
A lot of people voted Labour because she was
Labour.
not the person we thought she was.
So therefore, you know, actually what you said about the will of the people, I think the will of the people has changed, Rachel.
Well,
and the election showed us
Depends
that.
what polls you read. Some polls say now 60-odd% would vote for Brexit. So it depends. You know, if you're a Remainer, you're going to read the polls that are done among the most Remainers. If you're a Leader, you read those.
Carol, I loved what you said. What did you say? Unelectable Marxist.
Well,
that was a great line, wasn't it?
I mean,
what she unelectable.
Electable Marxist.
It was kind of magical what she did there, Nick.
Well, at last, I found out why, for all these weeks and months, Rachel Johnson's been coming in, because that was the most devastating summing up of what Brexit has done. I think you're absolutely right, and I do think that Mrs May is now caught up in the mangle, as you so rightly said. It was a very, very accurate portrayal, very impressive.
Okay,
but where you're wrong, just one line, just where you're wrong. I don't think she's... I think she probably should stay, and I think she probably should take the first... A bit like a boxing match. Put her out for the first 6 rounds and let her get smashed about a bit and then put someone else... I don't think she's the only person who could do it. You could argue that David Davis, who actually was a committed... No, hold on, but was a committed Brexiter, as opposed to Mrs May, who we understand, well, we know campaigned... not necessarily that vigorously, so I think someone else can do it, but essentially I would have thought what she's hoping for is to get through, is to stagger to the summer recess, get through a summer where the briefing and the sniping stops. If she can get to conference in October, early October, she will probably stagger on.
You know, this week, when she made the speech this week, where she called on other parties to help, you know, let's face it, we are going towards the biggest challenge for this country since the Second World War. So she asked other parties to help. Let's have a look. This was her being a grown-up, I think.
When I commissioned this report, I led a majority government in the House of Commons. And the reality I now face as Prime Minister is rather different. So I say to the other parties in the House of Commons, read this report, engage with the difficult issues it raises, come forward with your own views and ideas about how we can tackle these challenges as a country.
Now let's look at Corbyn's reaction to that. This, you know, the smart-ass Corbyn, who's supposed to be man of the people and care about the people. Let's look at what he says.
The government is apparently now asking other parties for their policy ideas. And so, if the Prime Minister would like it, I'm very happy to furnish her with a copy of our election manifesto. Or better still, an early election in order that the people of this country can decide.
So the future of this country is at stake, and that's his response to it. There was a time when politicians used to be patriots, where the love of their country was more important than their lust for power. That's not what's happening now. Politicians of both hues, Labour and Tory...
Are you talking about Theresa May?
Yes.
She's putting herself in front of her country.
The Labour Party trying to destroy her. Members of her own party trying to destroy her. For whatever... There was you know this story. There's a group of kamikaze Tory MPs who actually want... They've said they're going to vote against all her Brexit suggestions so that she will fail, Brexit will fail, Labour will get in, Labour will get in, and then it'll be a disaster. And then for the next 30 years, Tories will be back. Can I just finish this point? For the next 30 years, Tories will be back in power. Now, that's throwing the people of this country to the wolves. They don't care about what happens to us. That's just about party politics. Now go.
Thank you.
Now go.
I was just going to say she's going to fail because of this costly, fragile DUP deal. I mean, how long's that going to last?
Can I just say that I think, Carol, you're massively reinforcing Rachel's incredibly eloquent point that Brexit is this kind of weapon of mass destruction that destroys all in its way. I mean, I find your points kind of all over the place. You know, you're acknowledging that Theresa May has kind of not really got a leg to stand on, but you're accusing other parties of
plotting
against her. What I'm saying is do what's best for Britain and for the people of this country, and destroying it by arguing against... You know what's going to happen? If we keep on having a go at her, we are going to get the worst possible Brexit deal you can imagine, because we are leaving whatever happens, but we're going to get a worse deal than we had when we were in there, because she has no power, and she has no power because everyone's attacking her, everyone's pulling her apart. So either get behind her or we're going to get a bad deal.
I would say she has no power because she ran an incredibly misguided and arrogant election campaign, which we all said was going to result in this, that has ended up with her having no legitimacy. It's not fair to say that Labour aren't trying to contribute ideas. They suggested lifting the 1% cap on public sector pay.
She was bound to do that. She was bound to take...
Well, you say that she's not open.
From Labour.
Do you say that other parties aren't open to contributing ideas? I'm showing you that she's not necessarily open to other parties' ideas
and
either.
You think Corbyn Carol, Michelle... Nicola Sturgeon, Jeremy Corbyn, they're all going to meet Michel Barnier soon, so they are contributing ideas, aren't they?
Because, that's your point. The thing is, Carol, I just think, you know, Therese, do you really think that she's going to survive? Do you think she's capable of surviving? And if she's going to go, isn't it better for her to go now before we're deep in the mire of this?
If I was her, I would have walked away because no one should take the vilification she's had to take. However, I think she stayed. I think it took a bit of guts to stay every day. Can you imagine trying to do what she has to do every day with this kind of vilification? None of us could stand that kind of hatred.
She created it herself. She made her own bed. She shouldn't have called that election.
She didn't do it on her own, June. She was being egged on by other politicians.
No, by her two advisors.
Solidify your position
by
for
Nick
Brexit.
And Fiona.
Not
just by the research. That is such... I told her no.
On that note, guys, it's my debate. Right. And I am going to take issue with this billionaire philanthropist. Now, take a look at these images. Really look at them. Do you know the difference between you and the people you see in them? Luck. If you're watching this, the chances are you're not fleeing war in Syria, poverty in West Africa, or repressive regimes in Eritrea and Egypt. You're probably not pregnant, having been raped in Libya, risking your life on a dinghy, or trying to keep your small children safe in a French forest while the authorities regularly come and raze the little shelter you've built. That is the reality facing the human beings whose plight we have come to dismissively refer to as the migrant crisis. Unlike Italy, where 85,000 people have arrived this year alone, we in Britain tend to ignore this as much as possible, hoping that by distancing ourselves further from Europe, we can make the problem go away. Now Bill Gates has stepped into the fray, claiming that Europe must make it more difficult for Africans to reach the continent via the current transit route. I wonder if he has any idea just how difficult things already are. We must not mistake the fact that people are somehow bearing the horror of this journey with the idea that it's bearable. It's not. There are solutions, but making conditions more inhumane than they already are is not one of them.
Afua, you asked in your intro if Bill Gates has any idea how bad things are. This is a man who now devotes his life to philanthropy. It's a man who, in the past few years, has spent £30 billion on the very kind of people that are in these pictures. And I think what he did by saying this, and let's look at the quote of exactly what he said. Let's look at this quote. On the one hand, you want to demonstrate generosity and take in refugees. But the more generous you are, the more word gets around about this, which in turn motivates more people to leave Africa. Another thing he said, Germany cannot possibly take in the huge number of people who are waiting to make their way to Europe. This unfortunately means you have to make it more difficult for Africans to reach the continent via the current transit route. Now, there was a leaked story in a German government report in a German newspaper this week that said 6.6 million people are waiting to come. To cross the Med. 2 million of those are Africans. Now, already this year, figures that we know already, 85,000 people in Italy alone have hit Italian ports. They've predicted that by the end of this year, that will be 250,000. That's a city the size of Verona. That means every year in Italy alone, a city the size of Verona is going to come. But also, Italian authorities are saying that the people coming now aren't people fleeing war zones. They're not desperate. They're not desperate people who need to escape brutality or whatever. These are 7 out of 10, well, actually, no, 82% are economic migrants. So they're not the people that you describe. They're not people who are fleeing countries that are war-torn. They're not people who are starving. They're people who want a better life. And I completely get that. But the bottom line is you cannot squeeze the whole of Africa and every other country into Europe. It's not fair on the people living in Europe. There just isn't the money or the resources to deal with that.
So I don't disagree with you, and if you're hoping for me to kind of defend the idea that I don't think that I think that we can have unlimited numbers of migrants coming to Europe and that that's sustainable. I don't. So that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying this is a problem. I question the language that Bill Gates used around generosity. For me, these people are coming. That is a problem. It's not just a problem because it's not sustainable for Europe. It's a problem because so many of them are dying en route. The number who died last year is increased by 42%.
Okay, but
nobody thinks this is a good...
That is the fault of evil traffickers who don't care how many people die. They send them out to sea in inflatable dinghies and they drown. That is not the fault of Europe or any of the authorities in Europe. That's the fault of the traffickers who are taking the money.
Just before everyone else comes on, I'll tell you the point I'm hoping to debate, and you can all ignore me if you want, but it's not the question of whether it's great that all of these people are risking their lives and being abused trying to get into Europe. That's not good. What I'm hoping we'll debate is whether Bill Gates is right in saying that the way to solve this problem, which we all acknowledge, I think, is a problem, is to make conditions more difficult.
Yes.
I personally think that is highly misguided. I know Bill Gates. I'm very familiar with his work. I've worked with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, has spent $30 billion fighting poverty, and he understands poverty from that perspective. But I'm questioning why the idea that conditions aren't already basically as inhumane as they possibly can be. Where's the evidence that making life more difficult is going to be a deterrent? Where's the evidence?
The Aussie Prime Minister who's been here this week, he said that if you control illegal immigration, people coming in illegally, like the economic migrants, you can be more generous to genuine refugees, to people who are genuinely in trouble. That makes total sense to me. And I suppose the way to stop people getting away is to have a European flotilla across Libyan waters. Don't let them take to sea, because that's where they die. Well, that's the problem.
Just to go back to Bill Gates's point, what Bill Gates was saying is that actually we need to be investing more in those countries. Yes. So Bill Gates, unlike you, Nick Ferrari, is in favour of spending more on foreign aid for this very reason. And what we also mustn't forget is when we intervene in these regions, this is what happens a lot of the time. So we have to be looking at what we're doing in country, and that's why I'm in favour of spending more on foreign aid, because that's how you deal with these issues. If you make their own country safe, if you make sure there's good governance where they're from, they are not going to want to come here. And back to your point on economic migrants,
there's enough in the budget
my parents were economic migrants. Yeah. And isn't your husband?
Yeah. Completely.
So I think sometimes let's not confuse the two arguments, because in doing so we demonise economic migrants
I'm not
make
trying
it seem
to
as if
demonise
it's a bad thing.
What I'm trying
to say
is
that my family have contributed to Britain, and your
Europe
husband
cannot
certainly
take
has.
in
He
the
picked
amount.
a wonderful wife.
Yes. Good point. Yeah. Good point.
Made an honest woman.
It took a long time. I was quite ill. But anyway, somebody actually said to him once, as a joke, you're marrying her to get a passport. And he said, there are much easier ways to get a passport. It's 250 quid for a fake passport.
He suffered enough on the Libyan waters.
But seriously, no one is trying to demonise people about it. I get people everywhere when they want to come to Europe. It's a great life, of course it is. But Europe cannot sustain every other country in the world coming here.
We all accept that.
Agree with that.
We're just saying the solutions are different.
Like Afua, I have also met Bill Gates.
You've had dinner with him?
No, I haven't. I met him once, and I had a 25-minute conversation, and it sort of went like this. I think what you're doing in terms of child mortality and in terms of eradicating diseases, communicable diseases, are fantastic.
Malaria.
But what are you doing to address the problems of overpopulation in sub-Saharan Africa and so on, which are leading to these push and pull pressures and the migration crisis? And he said, the evidence shows that if you eradicate childhood mortality and so bring it down, people have fewer children. But I said, please make this your next mission. As we saw in all the news today, we're having species extinction. If we want to save the planet, we've all got to have fewer children or less children. I never know which one it is. So we've got to put that into the mix here. The reason we have a migration crisis is that the countries they come from are not viable. They're not sustaining their populations. They're dangerous. They're not productive. They're not economic. So we have to fix it on the ground.
We've also played a role in some of that. So we better
also... Iraq, Syria and Afghanistan are big countries.
This conversation has at least reached safe haven, because... Panel, it's me next, and I'm going to be getting out my wallet. Don't look so surprised. Confession time. I was not a good citizen the other week. What was my crime? Had I failed to separate the whites from the greens when I dropped by the bottle bin? Did I knowingly discard the lid from my double decaf venti half-soy non-fat coffee? Yeah, right. Like I'd be caught dead with that. I'm not Afua Hirsch. No, my sin was to pay my window cleaner in cash. This, according to a report that took 9 months to compile, means I'm a bad citizen and I'm aiding tax avoidance. What utter tripe. My window cleaner's tax affairs are nothing to do with me. Some people like to deal in and make payments in cash. It doesn't make them bad people. If the government is so keen to examine tax issues, well, how about a closer look at some of the multinationals who seem to move their cash around the world more frequently than June Sarpong changes her hairstyle.
I'm returning the favour. I'm totally on the same page as Nick. I think that, I think it's the grey economy.
Well, you're going to stick up for my coffee choice.
Yeah. No, you're a smoothie girl.
And your green bin changer as well.
It's only something like $6 billion a year. And, we all use cash all the time. And I don't like the idea, as I think Mr Taylor's report suggested, Matthew Taylor, that we have to have some contactless platforms where every transaction we make is visible to the authorities. I don't like that. I had to live for a week once without cash, which I've been longing to tell people about, without using any cash.
Why?
And during the week, I had to go to Paris, I had to go and see a rugby match in Twickenham, I had to have a dinner party. God, that sounds so poor. Yeah.
And I had to do wait, this is my week. I had to go to Twickenham, I had to go to Paris, and I had to have a dinner party.
It was a very quiet week. Anyway, I came, it was fine. Twickenham was fine.
Oyster... Why weren't you allowed to use
magazine
cash?
article, was it?
I was writing it up for a piece.
Right.
Oyster to Twickers, fine. Got a free lunch in the green room, fine. Didn't have to pay. Didn't buy a drink. It was when I got to Paris that the wheels came off and I ended up begging for euros in the Tuileries Garden to buy a cup of coffee in McDonald's because I couldn't use Uber in Paris because my phone would not connect to the Wi-Fi. So it's something to do with data roaming.
Yeah.
My provider... So I couldn't get an Uber. Couldn't get buses. And for some reason... they don't take contactless in Paris when I was there. So, I mean, it was completely impossible. And I didn't have any euros either, so there we were.
Snap you guys out of your bubble of Tuileries and Nick with his armoury of staff for his various properties. In the real world, right?
That's a gotcha moment. That's a gotcha moment.
The reason that cash is a problem is not so that we can buy our lattes with contactless debit cards, but because the majority of cash transactions are now probably in the criminal underworld. In America, they think 85% of cash in circulation may be in the hands of criminals because as consumers use cash less, and we all do use, even if not by force, we all do use our debit cards and our other digital devices to pay for things. More of a greater proportion of cash is being used by crime.
I must just counter that before we bring the other folk in. Didn't you used to love your birthday, getting a £10 note or 10 shilling note or £5 note from your grandmother? Yeah. Isn't the way to teach children, and your little one's too young yet, but the way is that you give him or her £1 a week pocket money, or you clean the car for £1 or whatever it might be. If you're caught short, to use a lovely euphemism, and you need to use the restroom at Paddington or King's Cross or Charing Cross, and it's 50p, are we going to put it all on credit? I'm not
like you. I can see my daughter getting her pocket money in bitcoins. That's fine with me.
What's she dealing in?
My grandpa used to give me...
about underworld.
My grandpa used to give me, and he was, in his 80s by then, this was in the 90s, he used to give me those gift voucher cards. It was completely cashless.
It's lovely having money.
It is. I have cash in my wallet right now, but I still think, the National Crime Agency in this country has said that cash presents a long-term strategic threat to the security of the country.
I just think what was a bit sinister about this report was that he's picking on people, window cleaners and gardeners and all the rest of it, people who probably don't earn enough money to pay tax anyway, most of them. And even if they do, we touched on it there, when they say the multinationals getting away with it without paying tax, when they see celebrities citing some tax scheme in Ireland to get away with paying tax, if they say, I'm not going to, I don't actually blame them. And I don't believe that 6 billion figure either. It sounds too much to me, that. But the bottom line is, wages are growing the fastest now among the low paid. Why are we meddling with a system that's actually working? This guy has no... he was Tony Blair's advisor. He has no experience of business. He doesn't know how business works.
Can I just bring in what he said, just so we can hear, since we're all talking about Matthew Taylor. This is what he said about cash and employment.
When we talk about technology and work, we're often very pessimistic that robots will take our jobs, but actually technology can make life easier. So what we're suggesting here, actually, is that as we move more to a cashless economy, that when, for example, your window cleaner charges you, you can pay cashlessly. At the same time, their tax can be paid in the same way as we as employees pay through PAYE, which makes their life easier. And if as a byproduct of that system, it also means that we crack down on the fact that we're losing about £6.2 billion a year through the informal economy, well, that's a benefit as well.
Thank you.
I mean, it's not, you know, I think it's really important that you raise the point about inequality, but, you know, and he also points out it tends to be lower income people, people at the bottom who don't have bank accounts, who aren't able to join the kind of banking cashless economy. Right. And if this is an emphasis on bringing more people in a fair way, then I think it's.
But some people like the gig economy. Lots of people like 0-hour contracts. They like because they can work when they want. They like it because they pay less insurance. Some people like that. It suits them. Yes, you don't get maternity benefits.
Not that I think that's Jane, you still look misty-eyed at the idea of your granddad sending you a £5 note.
I love it. Yeah, I still would like that now, please. Back to Rachel's dinner party set.
Yes.
Matthew Taylor's wife is actually a good friend of mine, so I only have good things to say about Matthew Taylor. And when it comes to cash, I pay for my hair extensions in cash. So,
right.
Yeah, so that's why this changes so much.
Time to cash out on that conversation, team, because it's time for this week's Straight Talker of the Week. There are lots of candidates, from Boris Go Whistle Johnson to Andy Murray correcting casual sexism in his press conference. But one man, or should I say young man, or boy, has also been dealing with the pressure. When 15-year-old Eddie took over Southern Rail's Twitter feed as part of his work experience, he could have had no idea what he was in for. Such as, "Hi, Eddie, would you rather fight one horse-sized duck or 100 duck-sized horse?" The classic Twitter question. Did it faze Eddie? No, it did not. Quotes, 100 duck-sized horses, he replied. A horse-sized duck would be pretty scary. Spot on, Eddie, spot on. He then went on to answer questions about what people should have for dinner, migratory birds and Game of Thrones. And asked how he handled his fame, he replied, "I'm just being me."
Love it.
And for that, Eddie, you are this week's Straight Talker of the Week. Rachel, you figured, or one of your family featured briefly in there. Do you agree that the award goes to Eddie?
I love that. Yeah. I love that. But I would have thought he'd been asking questions about delays and driverless trains.
Do you know, one of the questions he was asked, if you had to choose, would you have chopsticks for hands or rollerblades for feet?
Rollerblades.
Yes. Rollerblades, he said rollerblades.
Yeah. Question that, let's face it, phases us all. That's it for this week. I'm having fish and chips for dinner, by the way, Eddie. Good night.